So hi. So I'm John Jameson. I work here. I'm a digital accessibility developer at Princeton. So I do a lot of testing and remediation. And this is very much my project the last couple of years. So we're going to dig into it. I'll do a little basics and then hopefully get to some things that are more interesting if you are developers and site admins. We'll go from there. So I always start at the beginning of accessibility, which is about 4,000 years ago. This is a piece of wood. It's a board. It's been painted white, and there's hieroglyphics written on it. And some of them are black, and some of them are red. And some of them are red because they're the teacher's corrections. And I love this. This is on display at the Met. 4,000 years, what's changed? Teachers with red pens are marking up their students' middle pigment hieroglyphics. You know, proofreading, it's arcane. You've got a lot to learn, become a teacher. And, 26 years ago, we got the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And, they follow this pattern. There's a lot to learn. Things like, oh, this is a fake button that needs to be a button tag. Or, oh, that thing on the edge doesn't fit on the screen on a mobile. That thing you can't read, that needs more contrast. My job looks a lot like an Egyptian. So people have tried to help with that. There's a lot of dashboards out there. Dashboard tools are fantastic. I use them. They're very powerful, but they require training to use. They often require money to use. They have to be manually visited. You have to remember to visit them. They're not part of your daily workflow. If you're writing a new page or post or something and you hit save, your next thought is not, I should go to my dashboard and ask it to recrawl this content. There are instant checkers. They're also powerful. They're also great. They're also manually run. You have to be trained what all that stuff means. There's icons all over the page. I teach people how to use these. I just teach you how to use this. But there are literally thousands of people editing websites at Princeton that I've never met and will never come to one of my trainings and will never hear of this tool. So I wanted something that would embed on the website. So Adam Chadwick at Toronto Metropolitan University had forked a tool called Totally to make Sally, which I forked to make Editoria11y because open source is fantastic. And the 5 years since, Adam and I now work very closely together on features. And what we tried to do was make things that would automatically check. You wouldn't install it on a person's computer, you would install it on your website. So just it's spell check. You're typing something and a little tip pops up and says, hey. That's the experience that I'm going for. I don't want icons all over the page. I want one icon on the page that says, manual check, should this be a heading? If this all bold line of text is functioning as a heading, is this breaking out a section of content, then make it a heading, please. I say plain-ish language because I'm not doing my best here. Sending a pull request would be better wording for this, but attempting to put a class in headings into 3 sentences is an interesting challenge in tersity. And there's a little toolbar. Issue count lets you jump to the next issue, has some extra tools. The tips have things. The most recent release added a link to the page editor right in the tip. There's buttons you can mark it as checked and okay, which will dismiss it for everyone. You can ignore it, which just dismisses it for you. But that's it. That's the whole module. This is trying to be as simple to the end user as can be. It has 28 tests-ish, which is a small number in the accessibility world. Axe is one of the big checkers out there. It has 100, 150 tests, that kind of thing. This is not because Adam Chadwick and I are lazy and not writing a lot of tests. It's because we are deliberately cutting out tests for mistakes that content editors can't make or can't fix. This is supposed to be for the content editors, and if you start putting a flag on something that's like, hey, this has an incorrect ARIA attribute, they're going to be like, what now? So we tried to cut this down to mistakes you can make in C editor. So it's things like meaningless links. Like if you look at a page and just click here, click here, click here, click here, click here, it's going to flag it and say, hey, that's not great. Fake lists, fake headings, the outline, the page outline, if it's gappy, like the heading numbers, if they don't know what those numbers are for, it'll pop up something that explains what these numbers are for and why they matter. Images with no alt text, images with suspicious alt text. You know, I secretly know who each test is named for, and there's a new test for suspicious alt text with the word placeholder and TBD. I have not told that person they were testing for them. So, good times. Bunch of others. So, yeah. And there are some manual tools for people that know a little more what they're doing. On that little toolbar, there's a little sort of list icon that if it's clicked, pops open headings visualizer, and it'll throw the heading numbers on the page and give you a view of the page outline, the way a screen reader user would hear the page, the table of contents. And below that is an alt text visualizer, which will show you thumbnails of each of the images on the page and what their alt text is. And it will attempt to draw that alt text right on the images, so you can see it in place. And I say attempt to because I've never seen your theme code, and so I'm making a lot of guesses in my JavaScript about your page layout and what's positioned how. And it usually works, but you know, work with me. And yes, the dismissed alerts. I said you can mark things as okay or hide them. You can also restore them. So if there are hidden alerts on a page, the count goes down. So you might land on the page and get like a, you know, it might have 0 instead of 1 or 2 or 3. But a little eye icon appears that says there are hidden alerts on this page. And if you click that, they'll pop up with a little, each alert will have now like a crossed eye in blue instead of a yellow question mark. You won't see that for red things. The red alerts are things that can't be dismissed. If I know something's bad, some of those tests are not dismissible because they're inexcusable. And I'm very confident I'm right about this. But if the manual text dismissed, you can restore it here. Yeah, and then it phones home. So there's an API, it calls back, it populates a site-wide report. So you can go to the site-wide report and view pages with the most issues, the most frequent issues, things that have been dismissed, who dismissed them, when they dismissed them, you can undismiss them. It's a pretty simple dashboard. It's not going to compete with the enterprise tools. That's not what it's for. It's just to be sort of a quick reference of the content issues on your site. So yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Right. So writing this tool for myself and our sites is one thing, because I know what I'm dealing with. But when you open source something out into the interwebs, you don't know what everyone else has. And so some things I've found, sometimes sites need some configuration to prevent overload. So this is an example of a page on our HR site. You know, this is a page with forms, medical forms, insurance forms. You'd not be surprised to hear these are PDFs. Of course they're PDFs. Well, editorially automatically puts a manual check on every PDF and says, hey, you know, has anyone checked to make sure this was saved as a tagged PDF? So for some people that use this, they love that. You know, local government, things like that, where like they have to make sure that every PDF is tagged. This is very useful because they can mark it as okay and know whether or not it's been checked. For other people, it's just annoying. You know, it's useful when there's one random PDF on a page with 40. That's not very helpful. So there's configuration we got to, where you could do something like that. Sometimes you need to teach editorially what to do with your theme. If you have things like accordions, tab panels, carousels, things where there's going to be hidden content sometimes on the page, if it finds an issue inside one of those hidden pieces of content, and you click to jump to that issue, it can't get you there. It's off screen. It can't. JavaScript will return like null or undefined for the position of this element, so I can't put a tip on it. So you get a little error message that says, note, this content may not be visible. Look for it inside the outline container. And there isn't an outline container here because I'm completely giving up on this one. So there's things we'll get to. You can fix that because this is not super helpful. And sometimes I just need to find time to rewrite the test logic after receiving a bug report that the module is incorrectly flagging our web component as having empty text because someone found a new yeah, so there's these things called web components, which you have Shadow DOM, which is the super trendy kind of successor to an iframe. You don't need to know all this except to say that, like, I wrote editorially to be able to dig into that and check within that, but it never occurred to me someone might recursively nest 4 layers of Shadow DOM, and inside that have a slot template that I had not heard of before this bug report. Yeah, so sometimes you just have to open a bug report, and hopefully sometime in the next few months I'll deal with it. So So most sites are turnkey on install. And we're here for Beyond the Basics, so I'm going to get into some of that. But if you haven't played with this yet, usually you turn it on and it just works. So we'll start. But let's install it. If you have played with the project browser, part of Drupal CMS now, there is an accessibility tools recipe, which you can use, or you can just install it editorially directly. But I just love this recipe because it's called accessibility tools, and it installs my module. And that's all it does. But my module has multiple tools, so it's plural. I love the plural, it makes me smile. So you install accessibility tools, you open it up. What do? You go to the configuration page. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this tiny screenshot of the configuration page. We're going to use it as a progress bar. That's all. The configuration page at the top, there's a bunch of text. It's tips for setting it up, tips for troubleshooting. But what it starts with is it says, go look at permissions first. Because editorially sets up half a dozen permissions. And this is how it decides who's going to see the checker. So, view editorially checker, that's the most important one. Which roles will actually have this pop up and annoy them, because you don't want anonymous visitors to your site, the general public, seeing alerts that there's accessibility problems with your site. It may already have all the right roles. On install, look at the roles and permissions table, and if I see roles have been assigned a bunch of permissions that are pretty exclusively assigned to content editors, I pre-fill to view the checker and mark as hidden. So you can check. Mark is okay, that's controlled separately, because you might not want all your users to be able to mark things as okay for all the other users. You might want to limit that to roles that have actually had some training. Manage the results, that's to view the dashboard. I have that as a separate permission because the dashboard is the dashboard for your whole site. It's not aware of granular permissions for parts of the site, so there's security implications there. If you have roles that can only view part of the site and they get to the dashboard, they're going to be able to see page titles and URLs and things from other parts of the site. So that's there. Administer the checker, that's settings. All right, we're going to move down the settings page. Theme, I don't think I need to talk about what a theme is. This is Beyond the Basics. It's a color picker. Pick a theme. Yay. But beyond the basics, it's noteworthy that there is a way to inject your own CSS if you want. And this is all in the slides. Don't worry about reading code from across the page. So if you set a variable called editorially options overrides, it's kind of an Easter egg, and you can document it better in your module or theme. When the Drupal module bootstraps up to call the editorial library, if it sees that someone has set this variable, before it actually calls the checker in, it's going to just look for a function called editorially options. And you can find that. It's going to throw the pile of options that it's set up. It's pulled all the configuration, got it all together, and it's going to say, here, mess with it. And you can take that and send it back, and then we'll call the library. So it lets you do the library itself. The checker library that we're separate from the Drupal module has a lot more configuration options than the graphical user interface in the Drupal module. A lot of them have security implications. You don't want people messing with them unless they have access to JavaScript in your server. And if they can mess with the JavaScript in your server, they have the keys to the kingdom, so I'm not afraid of them messing with it. Good times. But one of the things you can do there is you can push another URL to the list of CSS files that will get injected into each one of the components. So you can have at it and make a theme print. And then give me a pull request so I can add it as a new base theme. Thumbs up. All right, down the list. Next option, show tips automatically when issues are detected. So there's a little toolbar. It has an open and closed state. If it's closed, it's just the number in the corner. If it's open, there's tips painted all over the screen. And it remembers what the user had on the last page visit. So if they've shut it, it'll stay shut. If they've opened it, it'll stay open. But you can tell it if it finds a new issue. The user's browser finds a new issue, override their preference and open. Always, or just on first detection, if this node was just edited and saved. Just only annoy the person who made the mistake. So that's there. It's just a question of you. How annoying do you want to be? Depends on your users and how much they'll tolerate. So next section is checking where on the page you're checking. So you don't want to flag issues that people can't fix. If parts of the page is coming from the theme code or views or things like that, you might not want the checker to annoy people about those things. So there's two very related things. One is what to check content in these containers is where you're going to say, I want you to check the main part of the page and maybe this part of the footer and this part of the header. Ignore the rest. And then within those, skip over lets you jump over certain tags. So if you have a widget or something you don't want to check within the main area, you can jump over. If you have never dealt with HTML, nothing wrong with that. We learn first time everywhere, all of us. In a browser, you can right-click on anything and inspect it. And it will show you how that thing was built, what the tags are. And so if I right-click on this footer, it's going to say, oh, footer is the name of the tag, and pound footer has an ID of footer, and dot footer has a class of footer. So I can click on things, and if it's flagging our logo for some reason that is false positive in our footer, it's going to get flagged in every page in the site. I'm just going to ignore it. So I can figure out some selector that's unique to it, and then figure out what to do with it. And so those two fields, there's two different ways I can ignore it. I can ignore it directly, skip over footer.logo image, let's say. That'll work perfectly. Or I could map out this part of the page. I could say only check main and only check the footer editable content section. Both of those work exactly as well, but one's going to run faster. Because ignores have to run a lot. The check route, every time I do a test run, I find your roots once. Almost every test has to check for ignores to knock out potential matches. So the ignores list has like 100-fold more effective of the performance of the checker. So choose carefully. Like nav.link purpose, classes, very fast selectors. Browsers are very optimized for that. That's a great selector. If this is like external links, if you're trying to ignore external links in your navigation, that would work great. If you didn't have that class, just nav A, well, that's going to ignore all the links in your navigation. It's not as specific. Or just .link purpose. That's going to ignore all your external links everywhere. So you want to try to be as specific as you can. And it's worth knowing that some parts of CSS selectors are inherently less performant. So there's things called attribute selectors. I can say nav A href, that's the URL, and I can say href starts with HTTPS. That's going to select absolute URLs. Works exactly the same as nav.link purpose. That's the selector link purpose is using, but it's slower. So you don't have to. Don't use that. And there's a new one, which is amazingly powerful, and I love it, called has, which lets you drop down from something. So I could say nav has external icon. That's going to select the exact same things, because all the external links have an external icon. It is dangerously slow. The browser manufacturers delayed years shipping this because they knew how much it hurt performance. So sometimes you have to use it, but don't use it if you don't have to. Last thought on that, watch out for nested roots. If you, let's say, try to do main and column 2 in the footer, but there's also column 2 in main, and you don't say footer column 2, you just say column 2, well now it's going to check main column 2 2, and it's going to check main column 2 2 when it checks main. So main column 2 2 is going to get 2 checks, and you're going to get duplicate alerts on those things, and you have a bad time, and your computer fan will be audible from orbit because of how many tags are getting run twice. I will say that it ships with some default ignores. So these are things like there's a check, they could do like 1, 2, 3, 4 written out. It'll pop up a flag, say, should this be a list? It's not going to use that in a table, because the table, 1, 2, 3, 4 is data. So it's going to ignore paragraphs and tables for the paragraph test. Headings in navigation, things like that. ARIA hidden, this is an attribute. ARIA hidden is a attribute that tells screen readers to ignore this thing. It's going to ignore images that are ARIA hidden, because it doesn't want to annoy you about what alt text you've written for an image if the screen readers have been told not to read the alt text on the image. So, yeah, these are guesses from my part. Sometimes it goes wrong. If you are ARIA hiding tab panels as they come and go, it could mean those images come and go from the list of image alts in the corner. Good times. Not going to read any of this, but just to say I also have ignores for all of the Drupal admin UI elements, the administration toolbar, various filters and web form pieces and things like that. If I've missed any, tell me. If you're playing with something and editorially is flagging on every page because there's something in a contextual region, I can add it to the list. So, all right, next section. I mentioned a while ago that there is a link to the page editor or the layout builder editor that gets put in tooltips if those links are on the page. It's a duplicate of the link that's on the page, so editorially checks for that first, doesn't make it up. That isn't always helpful. If you have, say, a view on the page that's pulling content from somewhere else, and editorially flags an issue in that, and the tooltip comes up, and then it tells your editor, well, edit this in the page editor, and they go to the page editor, it's not there, because you don't edit it there. So you can give editorially a list of selectors where it just won't draw those unhelpful helper links, your views and things like that. Yeah. So, good times. And then this is the end of the basic box in the settings, and it's not basic at all. Heading levels. So editorially now can check while you're typing, like spell check in CK Editor. And the thing about Drupal is CK Editor then assembles those fields and puts them somewhere. And where it puts them exists somewhere in the heading outline on the page that the site builder and Beamer knows about, but CK Editor doesn't know about, I don't know about. So if it's the body tag on a node, the node title should be an H1, and the first heading in the node body should be an H2. But if you're going to put this in like a block in the sidebar that has its own H2 or H3, then the first heading in there should be an H4, or whatever's one level down. So I have these convoluted little fields where you can say, if you want, say here's a selector for the CK Editor instance for which it should have an H2 or an H3. And the default, and this, I know this is too small to read, but it's what you'll see on the config page. The default explains what the defaults are. And the default is a form with an ID that starts with node that has a field called edit body wrapper, then it'll assume that. So that matches everything that ships with Drupal. A node of a page, a node of an article, that kind of thing. That's the default. So you can override that if you want, edit accordion wrapper or whatever you do. I will tell you the one trick is that Drupal, the name of the form changes, the ID changes depending on whether you're adding or editing. So you need both, or you need to do one of those funky measures selectors. So that's what all that's for. Okay. So, hiding the checker. Sometimes you don't want to show it at all. You can do that. Maybe your new search page, like you don't want to show the checker on search results. Rather than just ignoring that, you can just say, don't even view it. So that's just a selector. If it notices the selector, it'll just say, never mind, and won't even draw the checker. Part of this was written for a company that had some very cantankerous and very senior stakeholders, and they wanted to be able to hide it for them. So if you were doing something clever, like put the user number or something on the page when a login user's viewing it, you could say, don't show this for user 251. Hopefully you don't have that use case, but it's there. You can also do this the other way around, like hide all alerts if something is not present. So an example is like the edit button for the page, which is in .contextual region, and the href starts with /edit. If there's no edit link on the page, then don't show the checker. So you could write that and just globally disable if there's an edit button. Anyway, it's there if you want it. There is also just a simple checkbox to say don't check any content while it's being edited. This live editing checker, I wrote it. Everything else I've done up until now, I had something to work off of. Now, this is the first time I've done something like, as far as I know, no other hubris individual has done. Like Grammarly does this, but they have a budget of millions of dollars. It's hard. You might find it just annoying, frankly. So you can just turn it off. You can also turn it off granularly. That previous the selectors for disable if this is found. So you could just turn it off on specific node edit forms. But that'll just turn it off altogether if you don't like it. Yes. Link to test. There's a bunch of configuration related to basically external link icons. So so my test, I'll flag a link if it's just labeled click here. Well, if you're running an external link library, the link's accessible name is actually click here, link opens a new window. So that test won't work. So this lets you tell editorially things about like, here's the strings I'm using that I'm inserting into links that are external links that you should remove before testing the text. Or here's selectors you can use to tell that there is a warning present that this link opens in a new window. So you shouldn't flag someone to say, did you warn someone that this link's going to open a new window that you put that on? You shouldn't have to use this if you're using either external links or link purpose, because the defaults cover those modules in full. So I'm not going to dig into this much, because as far as I know, those are the two big modules that do this at the moment. Yeah, that section also has things about, there is the, that PDF test. Has this document been tagged and remediated? It's kind of a controversial test, like I said. Some people love it, some people hate it. So right here, you can change the selector for that test. And the default selector is for hrefs that end in .pdf. If you set the selector to just false, I know if you're a developer, you're going to be like, but this is a string, not a Boolean. I know that, you know that. If I see false in this field when I'm putting my configuration together, I just will turn the test off. But you can also expand it. So you could say, I don't want to check PDFs, I'd like to check docx, pptx, ppt, Google Docs, whatever. So you can, there's a lot of customization available for that test because it's complicated. Another new config item is don't cover these other widgets. This also came out of the Drupal CMS project because they create a recipe for Claro, which is a cookie, one of these cookie accept decline things, and so they're now recommending, they recommend use, but it's more visible that Claro is available. And in testing for Starshot, editorially was drawing right on top of Claro. Lovely. So I know how you can put selectors in of other widgets that are all fighting for space in the bottom right of your page. And if any of these are found, editorially will measure how wide they are and then scoop to the left. And if there's no room left to the left, it'll go above it. And it comes with config for Claro and same page preview. You play with same page preview, it cuts the node edit form into two halves of the page. And on the left is all the fields, and on the right is a live preview of what these fields would generate. So this just automatically slides off that live preview, and it's over there with the edit stuff. So, yeah. Okay, and then the goofy stuff. So, I briefly mentioned web components, because I'm not going to teach what they are today. If you know what they are, and you're using them, you can list them and scan inside these web components, and editorially will then check inside them. If you've never heard of them, don't worry about it. There's also something in there that says, remind editor that content in these embeds needs manual review. So if you have like Instagram or whatever embeds and you want to annoy your editors that are inserting these things to be like, have you checked this? Because editorially can't see inside that iframe. You could put selectors there for that. And the other two we'll skip for now. Theme.js will handle revealing hidden tooltips inside these containers. Next thing we'll talk about. And custom tests. So I think this is the last section. Syncing results to reports. So I mentioned the reports. There's that whole reports dashboard. There's a couple quirks there. One is if you've installed your site in a subfolder. Drupal's aliasing and pathing API is enormously headache-inducing. And I fought with it and fought with it. And one of the bugs I was never able to solve is that you'll sometimes get duplicated URLs from that. And so I just have something here where you can say, if you've installed a subfolder, tell me what the subfolder is, and if I notice in the dashboard that I'm getting things in and have 2 copies of that, I'll just delete one. If you've never heard of that problem, great. Query parameters, by default, I'm ignoring them. So if you, on your homepage, sometimes you're, let's say, have UTM or whatever, campaign queries and things like that, people are coming in, the dashboard's not going to end up with like 65 copies of the same page, because it's going to ignore those query parameters. But sometimes they matter. Page, the results for page 2 are different from the results for page 1. So there's some default parameters in there, but if you have like views and things like that with filters where you're using query parameters in really meaningful ways, add them here, and then editorially will treat each query parameter combination as a different page for the dashboard. And there's also a checkbox to disable sync altogether if you want to, I don't know, hide the evidence that you know problems exist. Anyway, it's there if you need it. Don't use it. Okay. Yes, that was a bit of a slog, I know, but that's the configuration. Let's do some fun stuff. So, JavaScript events. If you've never heard of a JavaScript event or JavaScript, the JavaScript event system, it works like Drupal's hooks. You can add event listener to the JavaScript world and give it the name of an event you want to listen for, and write out your function that you'll want to happen if it hears that that event has happened, and then that just goes to sleep. And if that event happens, JavaScript will say, oh, someone was watching for that, you go grab your function and run it. Well, Editorially has a lot of JavaScript events that it emits as it's testing so that you can mess with things. So edit pop is on screen here, that fires when a tip has popped open. So let's say. And events can send along details. Literally event.detail comes along with the event. And so like e.detail .result.element for edly pop is going to give you the element that caused the testing. It's what's being flagged. And so you could say like, that element, add a class or something, right? If say you wanted to open an accordion, you could be like, when the tip opens, open an accordion, please. So if you've never messed with these, you can take this code off the editorial documentation, add event listener, and just write console log e.detail, and then refresh the page, and it'll print into the console everything editorially sending that you have available to play with. So the example that you can do here, so like edly pop, you could say like, if the detail result element closest, so that means like if the ancestor of this matches whatever selector you want, then you can say e-detail tip, because the details also include a reference to the tip that just got drawn. Shadow root, you don't know what it is, just have to copy and paste. Query selector, so I'm going to dip into the tip now, and you can say, go find the custom edit links for edit, and delete it. Hide it. I only want the layout builder to show. Or you could change the text. You could do anything you want. The reason the event is there, this lets you modify the tip. So it's there. The editorially configuration, the library configuration doc lists all the events. These are the ones that I think are more likely for people to actually use. Run custom tests. We'll talk about that next. But that's the time to run them. Results fires when it's done testing to say results are available. That is how I sync results out to the API. But that lets you do anything you want to do with the results. Panel opened. That's when the panel itself opens and tips are being, or the buttons, not tips. The buttons are being drawn on the page. So there's an event there. Show hidden. We'll talk about that in a moment. And pop, we just saw. So those 5, I use them on our own theme, for what it's worth. So on open, for instance, every panel opened that event. We use that in our environment to do things like unstick the header. We have a sticky navigation header. It kind of ends up on top over below the editorially tips. It's just sort of annoying. So we just unstick our header if the panel's open. And I also will walk the page and look for any results inside our accordions and open each of those accordions. So rather than going tip by tip when it opens, I just pre-open everything. So that's how I'm using it. Show hidden last. Okay. So that configuration option for selectors where things might be hidden, if that is set, and only if that is set, editorially will send out an event saying show hidden, which gives your theme like half a second. It just sets a little timeout where editorially pauses and waits. It gives it a couple hundred milliseconds to do something. And so you can do something, like go find that element and advance to the correct tab, or like shift the carousel to the right frame, or whatever you need to do. It gives your theme a few hundred milliseconds to do that before the tip tries to draw. So that's what that's for. Yeah, okay. Last section, we're on time. Yes. Writing custom tests. So this is my favorite custom test I've seen in the wild. This is from a Canadian university. They have a link checker that they run, so they have a list of broken links they know are on their site. And they just have a GitHub repo where they just put that list of known bad URLs in there. And they have a custom test that runs that looks at the links on the page and sees if any of them match the list. And then it injects a custom tip that says this link might be broken. Clever. So, you can do two. Custom tests take 4.5 steps. The first, step 0 is to make sure you told editorially you're going to be injecting custom tests, because then the event system for custom tests activates. So you're going to add one to say I'm going to do just one. And then you're going to find your issues. You're going to tell editorially what you want to go in the tip. You're going to tell it which elements should be flagged, and then you'll tell it you're done. So finding issues. You can do anything you want. So we're going to add an event listener for heavily run custom tests, and then you go do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. But if you use edly.findElements, that's an exposed method I've put out there for you that is pre-filtering by the config for which containers to check within and what things to ignore. So you don't have to duplicate all that code or try to figure out what the configuration is. It's all there. It's also ducking the shadow DOM, doing all kinds of stuff. It's basically JavaScript's query selector all if you're a JavaScript person, but it's nested in all kinds of stuff. So you can just say edly find elements. You give it a string that's just what you want, what you're going to refer to this as later when you want to go and get the results from it, and then you give it a CSS selector. So let's say table.widget, and then you can the edly elements array gets populated with the results of that. So you can say find elements, call my list not in table, and then you can say edly.elements.not in table for each. Do whatever you want. Further tests, further filters, whatever. I recommend going this way. And then you tell editorially what you want in your tip. So the edly.m, capital M, is the messages object. So all of the strings. And so you can add something to your strings. edly.m.not in table. Be anything you want, as long as I'm not overusing the word. And you give it two things. You give it a title, which is a string. Widgets do not belong to tables. And you give it a tip. This is a function. So, you know, bracket, arrow, braces. It's a function because some tips people want to insert dynamically things like what is the text of alt text, things like that. So these all follow this format. And what to wait tips. So you put your tip content at the end, and then you populate edly.results. That's the results array of all of the things that have issues. And this is documented in the configuration. You don't have to write it all down. But you send the element that you want flagged, the name of the test that's going to need out of the edly.m messages table, the content of the test, the position. JavaScript insert JSON element has 4 options, has a bunch of options. But before begin and after begin are kind of the ones that matter. So you have a tag, let's say it's a paragraph, and you want to flag something in this paragraph. If you say position after begin, then that button is going to go inside the paragraph. But if it's a link or a button, an interactive element, you don't want to put a tip button inside button because HTML can't nest interactive elements. So you would say put it before the button. It's arcane, but I need to know. And then the dismissal key. That tells you whether this is a manual test or a red alert. If you put dismissal key false, this is a red alert, it can't be dismissed. If you want it to be dismissible, you need to give editorially a string that it can use to identify in the future that this is the element that has been dismissed. I recommend using edly.dismissal key, another exposed function, to generate that string because it's going to truncate it to the number of characters I'm expecting and make sure it's plain text. But you just give it whatever you want. You could give it the HTML, you could give it some attributes, you could give it the text content. You just give it something about this thing that you're flagging that's going to be the same tomorrow. Get it done, and then you need to dispatch your own custom event. So you create a custom event. It needs to be called edly resume, and then you document.dispatch event, and you send edly resume out into the JavaScript event sphere. and editorially says, oh, I was watching for that, on I go. And this is the reason the custom test is a count, because the count is the number of times editorially needs to hear I'm done before it continues. So you can have 512 tests in one event, or you could have a separate event for each test. It's up to you, just that number needs to match how the number of events that are wait for. And there's your tip, please do not put our widgets in tables. They explode on mobile. Yes, so very specific syntax, you can copy and paste on integration, but that's what you need to write tests. So roadmap, my roadmap for the near future is just bug fixes. Over the summer and fall, I was working on that live checker. It involved a lot of rewriting. There's known bugs and performance issues that I'm going to work on soon. There's also been a lot of requests for in the config to enable and disable tests. And I even have a merge request from Ann Milling that I need to look at and see if it's the right way to go. So I have to work on that. And the other thing I'm hoping to get to this year is a back-end rewrite. I would really like, there's a dashboard initiative going on to try to integrate all of these sorts of tools. So I would love to have like entity reference to the actual node kind of things in my tables so that views could use my stuff all over the place, like your content dashboard for the site. You could just put the issue count in there. So that's kind of what's on my mind. Yeah. So send me pull requests, ideas, help, please. It's open source. That's what I got. Questions? Yeah.
When it comes to this module, how does it coexist with other types of systems that are doing accessibility checks? And are they, in some instances, are they needed? Do they compare? How do they compare? For instance, you have like Google Lighthouse will have its checks. You'll have, I know DQ has its own thing. The apps tool, there's web IAM or something. But yeah, how does it compare?
I just question is, how does this coexist with all the other like checkers and dashboards and things? This is for specific people at a specific moment, is what I would say. So those other checkers are going to catch for many more things. And if you are a designer or developer, that's what you should be using. You should be using the other things as well. So this is essentially your maintenance tool. Like you've built this site, you've tested it in Lighthouse or Site Improver or Dubbot or whatever. You know the code is accessible. Now you're going to hand it off to people to break it. And so this is sort of the guardrails for your content editors to try to keep what they're writing accessible. Now that said, like it flags things when I'm doing the documentation, like skip heading level or like So I always laugh when my module catches my own mistakes because I'm like, how dare you? So just okay, this is for maintaining quality, I would say, after you pass the test.
So if you have something like Storybook or InVision, which has its own implementations of accessibility, and you're bringing over some components or into Drupal, then this would be okay.
Yeah. And they're going to check things. I don't check for contrast. Anything else? Be like just 1 minute.
It's a question, related question.
Yeah.
So in terms of WCAG, does it go like through most of the level 1 success criteria?
Question. How does this map to WCAG criteria?
Yeah.
The answer is that it maps poorly to WCAG criteria because this is a lot of what I'm testing for is in the nuance. WCAG is very absolute. Can you click on this button with the keyboard? So some of my things map pretty closely. There's WCAG things like, is the purpose of a link clear? Does this image have a clear text alternative? And you can look at those and be like, oh, my test is a one-to-one match to that. But then if you get into something like, what's the quality of the alt text? I have a lot of qualitative tests that are like looking for strings that are suspicious, that kind of thing. So, I need to conform to AA, but there are things in here that are, I would say, arguably AAA, and there's things in there that are not WCAG at all. So, like, if you have a lot of caps lock text, I'll flag that. You'd be like, come on, really? There's nothing about caps lock in WCAG, but it's hard to read a whole paragraph. I'm sure the next speaker wants to come in, so I got to call it here. I'll be here all day. Talk to you later. Cheers.
Thank you.